Thank you very much, Madam President. I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Make Provisions of a Financial Nature and for other related matters be now read a second time. Before I begin, Madam President, I would just like to indicate to honourable senators that we have some minor amendments that are being reviewed at this point in time to create or to perfect certainty with respect to the types of taxes that are being affected by this legislation, and those will be circulated in due course before we get to the committee stage. But they are simply for the avoidance of doubt and out of an abundance of caution to ensure that all of the taxes that we have in mind for the amnesty are captured. As we go through the bill, Madam President, the bill has more or less four components or four groups of measures. The first group of measures is the measures dealing with the increase in penalties for a number of matters which were announced in the budget statement 2021 in October. And those include dealing with pre-deal larceny, dealing with protecting children against the pernicious effects of alcohol and tobacco, dealing with persons who may wish to try and sell narcotics to children, dealing with the environment and the illegal quarrying that is taking place. So that is one group of clauses in the bill that affect the Minerals Act, that affect the State Lands Act, the Children Act, the Tobacco Control Act, Liquor License Act, and the Pre-deal Larceny Act. The next important measure is an increase in the borrowing limit under the Development Loans Act. The third group of clauses or measures deal with the liberalization of the motor fuel sector, of fuel prices in terms of the price of gasoline and diesel, auto diesel. And the fourth group of matters deals with the tax amnesty. We are also making an adjustment to the Government Savings Bond Act to allow savings bonds to be issued in foreign currency. With respect to the amendments to the various acts that deal with increase in fines and penalties, and before I continue, Madam President, I'm never up to date with the speaking time.
You have 45 minutes,
45.
and you will be finishing at 18 minutes past 11.
All right.
And it's a few seconds after that. I'll give you a 5-minute warning.
No problem. Thank you very much. It's just that the times keep changing all the time. So, with respect to the Pre-deal Larceny Act, it's widely acknowledged that pre-deal larceny continues to negatively impact the development of the agricultural sector and is one of the greatest disincentives in the sector. This crime has moved from the theft of small amounts to large amounts of produce, which poses serious dangers to farmers and their workers. Clause 2 of the bill seeks to amend certain sections of the Pre-deal Larceny Prevention Act, Chapter 1003, to provide for an increase in fines that at this time are thought to be inadequate to be an appropriate deterrent. So the penalties are being increased by 200% and are expected to have a significant measure of success in preventing commission of offenses under the Act. In tandem, the penalties under Section 23 of the Summary Offences Act, Chapter 1003, which speak to theft of agricultural produce, are being amended by Clause 3 of the bill, again to provide an increase by 200%, as we signaled in the budget statement. With respect to protecting our children, It is proposed, as I indicated in the budget statement, that all penalties for the sale of alcohol and tobacco to minors be increased by 200%, as well as penalties for the unlawful use or sale of tobacco or alcohol products increased by 200%. This is in clauses 5 and 19 of the bill. With respect to amendments to the Children Act, Chapter 4601, it is considered necessary to direct attention to those in society who expose children to narcotics, drugs, psychotropic substances, and other dangerous drugs. So Clause 6 of the bill amends the Children Act, Chapter 4601, increasing penalties under Sections 35, 36, and 37 by 200%. With respect to state lands, notwithstanding the provisions of the State Lands Act, Chapter 5701, illegal quarrying continues unabated in Trinidad and Tobago. It affects the environment and leads to degradation of the soil, flooding, and has serious adverse health consequences for persons who reside in the vicinity of illegal quarrying activities. As a means of addressing this problem, the penalties, fines, and custodial sentences associated with breaches under Section 25 of the State Lands Act pertaining to digging or removal of material without a license are being increased by 200% under Clause 7 of the bill. Clause 7C also seeks to introduce a new Section 30A, which will disqualify any person who knowingly trades in or uses material which is dug, won, or removed from state lands in contravention of the Act from engaging in construction funded by the government. The intent of Clause 7C is to further government's resolve on impetus to remove all traces of criminality from the quarrying sector and to bring about better regulation of the sector. This provision targets those who knowingly seek to launder illegally gotten material, whether directly or indirectly, through projects funded by the government. The Minerals Act is also being amended, and Clause 8 of the bill seeks to increase all penalties under Section 45 of the Minerals Act to address the issue of illegal quarrying. Clause 8B also introduces a new Section 47A, which is similar to the newly proposed or introduced Section 30A that I just spoke about. I now move on to the changes with respect to the liquid petroleum products sector. In the budget statement 2021, in October of last year, I indicated government's intention to reform this sector. At the time, I indicated it was the government's view that in the context of oil prices at that time, the fuel market should be liberalized. I would now proceed to introduce the legal framework by which the sector would be expected to operate in this phase towards full liberalization. Given that both the Ministry of Energy as well as the operators in the petroleum product sector must put in place the necessary systems to seamlessly transition into a new way of doing business, Clauses 9 and 10 will come into operation only on such dates as is fixed by the President by proclamation. This will be found at Clause 20 of the bill, a commencement clause. And before I continue, let me just say very clearly that at current world oil prices, the cost of super gasoline and premium gasoline, the prices, world prices are more or less what they are at the pump in Trinidad and Tobago today. However, diesel is heavily subsidized, and the price of diesel at the pump in Trinidad and Tobago today is significantly lower than the world market price of diesel. So that as we go forward, the way the legislation is formulated, it allows the Minister of Energy, and I want to stress this is the Minister of Energy, because I noticed a media house got it wrong. It is not the Minister of Finance. The Minister of Energy will establish a wholesale price for these fuels at the beginning of the month, and at this point in time, it is the government's intention to continue to subsidize diesel by establishing a wholesale price that will be lower than the actual world market price of diesel until the situation improves in the country in terms of the pandemic and the economic situation. Clause 9A renames the Petroleum Production Levy and Subsidy Act wherever it is found in the Petroleum Act. It introduces the term fuel levy in the name of the Act as a consequence of the newly created fuel levy. Clause 9B deletes two existing definitions and substitutes definitions for marketing business and trading business, making way for newly defined terms in Section 36(1) of the Petroleum Act. These two definitions are required to streamline the two businesses to better reflect, on the one hand, that a person operating in the marketing business will sell wholesale to gas stations retailing petroleum products, having purchased such products from a refining or trading business, and this would be Paria, for example. On the other hand, a person operating in the trading business will supply petroleum products only to a person operating in the marketing business. This means that the person carrying on trading business will not be able to sell petroleum products to gas stations. Clauses 10A, 10B, and 10C of the bill have a similar effect to Clause 9A, as these amendments to the Petroleum Production Levy and Subsidy Act are meant to capture the new fuel levy by amending the long title. Clause 10D amends Section 2(1) of the Act. This is the Petroleum Production Levy and Subsidy Act, Chapter 6202, which deals with the interpretations to be given to words falling under this section. Clause 10DI deletes the word levy, under which under the Act only relates to the levy paid by persons carrying on a production business, which would be oil production, gas production, etc. This deletion is necessary to provide for a new definition of the word levy, which is found at Clause 10D, Roman 5V, which means a levy payable by a person carrying on production business under Section 9(1) and marketing business under Section 11A1. Clauses 10D2 and 10D4 delete and substitute the definitions for marketing business and trading business, as was done under the Petroleum Act, as I mentioned before. I would like now, Madam President, to give an overview of the fundamental change being made to the renamed Petroleum Production and Fuel Levy and Subsidy Act, and that is the introduction of the fuel levy. Clause 10K of the bill introduces a new Section 11A of the Act. Section 11A1 will require a person conducting marketing business to pay monthly to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries a fuel levy. And might I say that the way this will work is that once the price of oil is over $65, the fuel levy will be zero, because that is the price at which current prices at the pump were predicated. So the price of super and premium gasoline are based on an assumed notional oil price of $65. So that as the price goes over $65, there will be no fuel levy. As it goes below $65, a fuel levy will come into play. So it means that the prices at the pump at this time would be the yardstick for prices going forward in terms of gasoline. Sections 11A2 and 11A3 provide for the monthly computation of the fuel levy in respect of sales of each petroleum product listed in the schedule to the Act. At Section 11A2, where the person conducting marketing business purchases petroleum products from a trading business, the formula for the fuel levy would be the wholesale price minus the ex-terminal price minus the gross margin multiplied by the volume of sales by wholesale for the month. What this means effectively is that if the price of oil is below $65, then the world market price for gasoline would be below the current prices, and the difference would be made up by a levy where it is now made up by a surplus. So right now, Madam President, if the price of oil was, say, $40 or $50, the sale of fuel would generate a surplus, and that surplus is paid back into the consolidated fund. We are now removing this entire concept of a surplus and introducing the concept of a levy, which only operates when the price of oil is less than $65. Where a person conducting marketing business purchases petroleum products from a refining business, the formula would be the wholesale price minus the ex-refinery price minus the gross margin multiplied by the volume of sales by wholesale for the month. And that is in clause 11A3. To have a better understanding of the calculation of the fuel levy, we should look at clause 10D5 of the bill that inserts the following definitions. Ex-terminal price means the price at which petroleum products may be disposed of or are to be deemed to have been disposed of by the trading business of any person to the marketing business of such person. Ex-refinery price means the price at which petroleum products may be disposed of or are deemed to have been disposed of by the refining business of any person to the marketing business. So let's take the current context. Paria, fuel trading, purchases fuel primarily from the East Coast refineries of the United States. So the ex-refinery price would be the price coming out of those refineries in the United States. The fuel is then received by Paria and then sold to Unipet and NP at a wholesale price. So that the ex-refinery price is the price coming out of the refinery and the ex-terminal price is the price coming out of Paria. The wholesale price means the price fixed by the minister under section 31(3) of the Petroleum Act, and I have just indicated that this gives the Minister of Energy the flexibility to fix a wholesale price for particular motor fuels that is lower than the actual world price if circumstances dictate that. There's not going to be a situation where the minister would fix a wholesale price that is higher than the world market price. In addition to the computation of a fuel levy, Section 11A also provides that a person conducting marketing business is required to make a return confirming the amount of volumes in liters of petroleum product sold to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries no later than the 10th day of each month for the preceding month. The minister is then required to notify the marketing business of the applicable fuel levy within 5 days of receipt of the return, and the marketing business is required to pay the fuel levy within 5 days of being notified by the minister of the fuel levy. The levy, as I indicated previously, is then to be deposited in the consolidated fund and used for the service of Trinidad and Tobago. A marketing business who fails to pay the fuel levy would be subject to the penalties indicated in the bill. There's also a defense now introduced in Section 11A8, where directors and officers of a marketing business can make a defense to cater for them not paying the fuel levy within the specified time. They can show that it was not done with their consent, and they exercise all such due diligence. So this is the directors and senior managers of a marketing business. Clause 10D3 merely cleans up Section 2.1 to introduce definitions in the appropriate alphabetical order, as does Clause 10E, which renames the fund in Section 5.1 of the Act to the Subsidy Fund, from which the Minister of Finance will make advances to subsidize the prices at which petroleum products are sold by persons carrying on a marketing business. So this ties back into what I was saying, that since the government has decided to continue to subsidize the price of diesel going forward until things improve, the Minister of Finance will have to send money to the subsidy fund for that purpose, and this is dealt with under clauses 10E2, 10F, 10H2, and 10K. There's also a new definition of petroleum production levy inserted into the Act by the way of clause 10D5. And consequential amendments are made at clauses 10HI, 10I, 10J, and 10K. And in light of the fact that definitions for the term ex-refinery price and wholesale price are now found in Section 2.1 of the Act, Clause 10G of the bill deletes those definitions from Section 8.5 of the bill, and the cleanup is found at Clause 10G3 of the bill. So to summarize, Madam President, what we are doing is creating a transparent mechanism where the ex-refinery price, that is to say, the price of motor fuels sold by a refinery that would be shipping fuel to Trinidad and Tobago, will be known and published. The terminal price, which is the price that Paria would charge for the fuel after adding in its handling costs and its other expenses, will be known and published. The wholesale price, which is the price at which the fuel is sold to the dealers, would be known and published. And then the dealers would be allowed to put their own margin to arrive at the final price at the pump. And as I indicated in the other place, if the government determines that dealers are engaging in price gouging, then appropriate modifications will be made to the legislation to put a cap on the margin that dealers would be allowed to charge. At this point in time, we are leaving it to competition, but if we discover cartel behavior, collusion, or price gouging, the government will not hesitate to amend the legislation appropriately to protect citizens. Moving now to the Development Loans Act, Clause 11 of the bill. This increases the permissible headroom under the Development Loans Act, from which the government of Trinidad and Tobago may seek external or internal borrowings. We are increasing it from $55,000 million to $65,000 million. This measure has become necessary because of the deficit financing that has taken place in 2020 as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic and the worldwide recession and issues with respect to revenue arising from the pandemic. The government has had to engage in deficit financing that was not planned, and therefore we have only $2.5 billion left in headroom within the Development Loans Act. Might I add that there are two other acts under which the government borrows, External Loans Act and Guarantee of Loans Act, and those have adequate headroom. But the Development Loans Act is the act that is used to allow borrowing by the central government. And as I indicated, because of the deficit financing that we have had to engage in, the unplanned deficit financing, we do not have sufficient headroom in the Development Loans Act. With respect to government saving bonds, Clause 12 of the bill will amend the Government Savings Bonds Act, Chapter 7141, and the regulations under that act to facilitate borrowings denominated in foreign currency. We have been approached by many persons in Trinidad and Tobago, many citizens who have US dollar deposits in the commercial banks earning 0.5% or less. And the question asked of us is whether the government would be partial to issuing government savings bonds in US dollars. And we are. And we do believe that we can issue savings bonds that would provide a very attractive interest rate to citizens of any category, whether at the lowest level, middle, or upper level, so that the kind of interest rate that one might see over 3 or 4 years might be 3%, which is a significant improvement over the 0.5% that people currently get on their US dollars. In addition, we would also be issuing savings bonds in Trinidad and Tobago dollars so that persons can benefit from an attractive return on their savings. According to the central bank, TT deposit rates have been below 1% since 2012 for the last 9 years. The deposit rates at the bank in Trinidad and Tobago have been less than 1%. The current average, as far as I'm aware, is 0.8%. And this also affects mutual funds and credit unions because they have broadly mirrored the trend of deposit rates in the commercial banks. We believe there is a local appetite for domestic savings bonds, both in Trinidad and Tobago dollars and foreign currency, and we will be issuing government bonds in the near future as part of the deficit financing rather than simply going to a commercial bank or to foreign institution to provide the loan financing for the service of Trinidad and Tobago. We thought instead we could offer this opportunity to citizens who would now get an attractive return on their savings, which are now returning next to nothing. So Clause 12 of the bill amends Section 8 of the Government Savings Bond Act to allow the minister to make regulations in respect of the currency of the bonds. And there will be a number of consequential regulations that will flow from that. I move now to the tax amnesty, and as I indicated, Madam President, we are looking at some amendments which will clarify and confirm the complete range of taxes that are going to be captured by the tax amnesty, because it's the government's intention to capture as many, if not all, existing taxes in all the various tax laws. The last amnesty that we implemented yielded an astonishing sum of $2.4 billion. We never expected that. We were expecting maybe $1 billion for the most. We got 2.4. And therefore, a tax amnesty has proven to be a very productive measure in terms of mopping up unpaid taxes outside there. But might I also say that we in the Ministry of Finance and the government as a whole have been bombarded by requests from persons in the business sector and individuals that we defer taxes. We can't, because in order to provide the relief that people also want, the relief in terms of grants, the relief in terms of loan facilities, guaranteed loan facilities, etc., the government requires revenue. So if we were to defer the collection of taxes, we would not be able to run the country or provide all of the relief that people are asking. So it's a catch-22. So what we thought we would do, since we know that businesses are struggling, that we will introduce this amnesty so that persons who, for no reason other than the difficulties of the pandemic, have not paid their taxes on time within the last 15 months or so, would now be able to do so without having to incur penalties and interest, which are quite substantial, as you may know, Madam President. The bill will therefore establish a tax amnesty by amending the miscellaneous provisions, Tax Amnesty, Pensions, National Insurance, Central Bank Companies, and Non-Profit Organizations Act, number 13 of 2019, and will be applicable to interest, outstanding interest, and penalties under the Registration of Clubs Act, Income Tax Act, Corporation Tax Act, Unemployment Levy Act, Petroleum Taxes Act, Health Surcharge Act, Value Added Tax Act, Stamp Duty Act, Section 54 of the Property Tax Act, Parts 9, 11, 13, 14, and 15 of the Miscellaneous Taxes Act, and the Tourism Development Act. So we're trying to capture all of the taxes that are out there in terms of providing this relief, in terms of this waiver of penalties and interest. And as I said later on, the Chief Parliamentary Counsel's Department is currently going through all of the various tax acts to make sure that when this bill is finally approved in this House, and I am asking members to approve it, that we capture every single tax and there's no ambiguity. The amnesty will be applicable for the years up to the 31st of December 2020, so it's the last calendar year, and also for the period 1st January 2021 to 31st May 2021, and will grant relief from penalties and interest and outstanding interest once the outstanding tax liability is paid between July 5th, 2021 and September 17th, 2021. And as we did before, There's a provision which allows the minister with responsibility for finance to, by order, prescribe a later date to end this period if considered appropriate. If at the end of the period, whether it is September 17th or a later date, the interest and other penalties which would have been payable would be revived and become payable as if the amnesty had not occurred. There are two other measures, Madam President, that I mentioned in the budget statement, and those are a tax waiver on imported construction material for approved building projects and tax imposition on luxury items. These do not require legislative amendment. They are done by ministerial order under Section 8.1 of the Value Added Tax Act. We are currently putting in place all of the measures that would be required to identify what is an approved project and how it would be considered. And so these orders will be published in due course. So those are the matters in the finance bill. How much time do I have, Madam President? Madam President? Madam President? How much time do I have?
You finish at 11:18. It's now 11:04.
Okay.
So you have 14 more.
Yeah,
Give you a
thank
warning
you.
at 11:13.
Thank you, Madam President. We have trained ourselves in the other place to talk for 30 minutes. So I'm finished. So I simply want to repeat that with respect to the fuel liberalization measures, the bill contains a commencement provision, so that will not be implemented immediately. We have a lot of things to put in place. And the bill also allows the Minister of Energy to prescribe a wholesale price for any particular fuel that is lower than the world market price, which allows us to continue a form of subsidy for a period as long as it is required. And I also want to point out that if we determine that dealers are engaging in cartel behavior and fixing prices, we will also deal with that legislatively. With respect to the amnesty, as I indicated, we have some amendments that we are looking at, which are not major in scope, to just make sure that there's no confusion as to exactly which taxes will be subject to the waiver that will be created by the tax amnesty. I beg to move, Madam President.